In this video, we will discuss Buddhism as a living tradition in the 21st century. From its beginnings through the 21st century, Buddhism has a very strong focus on enlightenment, particularly in following the path of the Buddha, or awakened one. The Buddha, Siddhartha Gautama, taught various ways that one could achieve enlightenment by understanding the nature of life and how to break free of that nature, particularly the cycle of rebirth. In Buddhism, this ultimate goal is nirvana, which is similar to the idea of moksha in Hinduism. But beyond just breaking free of the cycle of birth and rebirth, nirvana is focused on achieving enlightenment in not only a physical, but a mental capacity as well. Nirvana for most Buddhists is the ultimate goal of their tradition and their life. One of the ways that many Buddhists try to achieve this is through the middle way. The middle way is the idea of moderation in everything. While there are some Buddhists who will take an extreme approach to poverty or not eating excessively, abstaining from sexual conduct, violence, and so on, there's often this understanding of a middle way, and that moderation is essential in all things in life. We'll talk about a bit later how there is a focus on non-attachment, and the middle way is a way to do this by not being attached to either pain or pleasure, but simply walking the path in between them. Like in Hinduism, we see an emphasis on karma in Buddhism, though the definition is slightly different. As Jeffrey Broad states, quote, "Every individual's actions and intentions determined by the circumstances of their next rebirth," end quote, is what karma is in Buddhism. One of the key beliefs of many Buddhists is the idea of interdependent origination. This idea of interdependent origination is not about independent, so you can see this idea of inter versus independent, but the idea that everything has a cause, an idea of causality. Nothing is created independent of anything else. So humans' existence is interdependent on the existence of other phenomenon as well. We see along with this idea of interdependent origination, the idea of anatman, which means no self or soul. Again, this goes along with the idea that humans are not in some way special because they have been created in a particular way, but that they're interdependent on other things, and that they do not have a self or soul more than anything else would. One of the key teachings in Buddhism that helps many Buddhists to understand the key philosophical points is called the Four Noble Truths. For many Buddhists, the Four Noble Truths are the pathway to achieving nirvana or enlightenment. The first of the Four Noble Truths refers to dukkha, which is literally suffering. And the first Noble Truth states that life is suffering. For a Buddhist to understand the true nature of life is to understand that life will always be composed of suffering. The second Noble Truth has to do with trishna, or desire, or wanting. And the second Noble Truth claims that suffering, which is all of life, is caused by the desire for things, regardless of what that desire is. The act of desiring or wanting something is what leads us to suffer. Third is the idea of nirvana. With our idea of nirvana here, Buddhists believe that to stop suffering, we must stop desiring, and that we can do this, that there is a possible way to achieve nirvana and break out of this cycle of birth and rebirth and achieve enlightenment. And the fourth noble truth refers to the Noble Eightfold Path. The way to end desire and to achieve nirvana is through this Noble Eightfold Path. The Eightfold Path, often called the Noble Eightfold Path to refer to the fact that noble people should follow it, has, as you can tell, 8 points, and is often represented by the Dharmakakra, which you can see on the right here. The first point is right view. Right view is recognizing the truth of suffering, or the truth of karma, that every action and intention determines how one is reborn in the next life. The second is right resolve, which refers to committing to seeking enlightenment. The third is right speech, and refers to only speaking kind words rather than hateful speech to others. The fourth is right action, which refers to doing good, not stealing, engaging in sexual misconduct, killing, committing violence of any sort, so on. The fifth is right livelihood. The idea here is that one's occupation or life as a whole should do no harm and should benefit others. The sixth item is the right effort, and this is focused on cultivating good skills and thoughts in one's life. The seventh is right mindfulness, and this refers to often the practice of meditation and being aware of one's body, senses, mind, personality, and so on. And the final is the right concentration. This particularly refers to the middle way that we talked about earlier, the moderation of not seeking pain and not seeking pleasure, but finding a path between them that involves non-attachment. As you can tell, Buddhism is strongly focused on meditation. In some branches of Buddhism, meditation is important, but is not the chief focus of the tradition, while in other branches, meditation is one of the most important parts of the tradition. Meditation can take many different forms in Buddhism. It can be focused on calming oneself, on reflection, on insight, and can even be done by walking. Mandalas are often used for meditative purposes in Buddhism as well. We see mandalas frequently in 21st century American civilization, whether it is a mandala quilt or even a coloring book. In Buddhist tradition, mandalas typically are focused on demonstrating the connectedness of everything. Some Buddhists believe that the mandalas create a space for the inner deity of oneself to come out into the mandala and connect to everything else. Regardless of the belief, the mandalas are important in meditative purposes for this emphasis on connecting everything in the universe and demonstrating that in an artistic manner. Perhaps the most important holiday for Buddhists is Vesak. This holiday celebrates several different things. First, it celebrates the day that the Buddha, Siddhartha Gautama, was born, but it also celebrates the day that he achieved enlightenment and the day that he died. Because of this emphasis on the Buddha and the emphasis on enlightenment, many Buddhists will celebrate this holiday by lighting candles or lights, often in the form of lotus flowers, and meditate to remember the Buddha's life. One of the main branches of Buddhism is Theravada Buddhism. This form of Buddhism is typically thought to be the most traditional and conservative. People who are part of this branch of Buddhism are typically monastic. Theravada Buddhism is not the kind of Buddhism you would see in modern America, anybody walking down the street. Rather, it is specifically people who are devoted to studying the teachings of Buddhism and its origins with Siddhartha Gautama, the Buddha. And one of these ways is through studying the Tripitaka, which is the Buddhist scriptures, literally meaning the three baskets. And the Tripitaka contains various teachings about monastic life and teachings of the Buddha, and is one of the few texts that can be in some way traced back to the Buddha. The other major branch of Buddhism is Mahayana Buddhism. Unlike Theravada Buddhism, which is particularly for monastic societies, Mahayana Buddhism is more open to other people being part of it. This does not mean that there are still not monastic societies in Mahayana Buddhism. We'll talk briefly about those in a moment. But when you meet somebody who's Buddhist, they are typically be part of Mahayana Buddhism unless they are a monk or a nun. Mahayana Buddhism focuses on shunyata, which is this idea of interdependent origination, that nothing has independent existence. For most Mahayana Buddhists, everything is interconnected in some way. Because of this, there is an emphasis on people called bodhisattva. A bodhisattva is somebody who is on the path in quest for enlightenment, much like the Buddha, but before achieving nirvana, recognizes that they have almost achieved it and stops so that they can help everyone else achieve nirvana as well. You can see this principle of shunyata here with this journey, as they recognize the interconnectedness of everyone and the emphasis on helping everyone else achieve enlightenment before they will go on to do so. Theravada and Mahayana Buddhism are the two major branches of Buddhism. There is a third branch which is sometimes considered a separate branch, and sometimes considered a subset of Mahayana Buddhism. This is called Vajrayana Buddhism. And Vajrayana Buddhism has, again, its own branches, but Vajrayana Buddhism is typically focused on mantras and understanding secret knowledge within the scope of Mahayana Buddhism and bodhisattvas. One of the perhaps most popular branches of Vajrayana Buddhism is Tibetan Buddhism. We see this in the area of Tibet, and the leader of Tibetan Buddhism, one of the main gurus or teachers, is the Dalai Lama. The Dalai Lama today is the 14th Dalai Lama, and for Tibetan Buddhists, the Dalai Lama is a reincarnation of the Bodhisattva of compassion. This person who is the Dalai Lama is somebody who has been, according to the tradition, reincarnated 14 times, because even though they recognize the truth of enlightenment, they do not achieve nirvana because of their focus on helping everyone else achieve enlightenment as well. One of the other forms of Buddhism we see in the 21st century is Zen Buddhism. Zen Buddhism is typically considered a branch of Mahayana Buddhism and focuses heavily on meditation. Mahayana Buddhism is a branch as a whole focused on meditation, with Vajrayana Buddhism splitting off to focus on taking action after that meditation, whereas Zen Buddhism focuses more on the meditation itself. We can see a stark contrast between Zen Buddhism and its focus on meditation over doctrine. versus the Theravada Buddhists who believe that doctrine, the Tripitaka particularly, is one of the most important features of Buddhism. Zen Buddhism focuses heavily on mantra, not just for the idea of ingraining the mantra in oneself or one's life, but also for the mystical qualities that the mantra can have by repeating them. Now that we've reached the end of this video, you should be able to identify and describe the main beliefs and rituals of most Buddhists, describe the main branches of Buddhism and distinguish among them, and explain the importance of the Dalai Lama to Tibetan Buddhism.